The ship was breaking apart. Metal screamed around Ethan Cole as fire tore through the cockpit. The console exploded in front of him, throwing sparks across his faceplate. He pulled the control stick hard to the left, but it was useless. The engines were gone. The ground was coming fast. He hit the crash alarms and shouted into the comm, but no one answered. The fleet had vanished from his radar minutes ago. He was alone. The red warning lights turned the cockpit into a flashing cage. He saw the planet below, a dark surface covered in storm clouds and lightning. His ship cut through the sky like a burning stone. The impact hit like a hammer. The hull ripped open. His head slammed against the seat. For a moment, there was only silence. Ethan woke to smoke and blood in his mouth. The ship was half buried in dirt and ash. The air hissed through cracks in the hull. He coughed hard and tried to move. His arm burned, maybe broken. He tore off the safety straps and crawled out through a jagged hole. The sky was red and heavy with dust. The wind carried the smell of metal and ozone. He looked around. The ground was covered with black stone and glass-like soil. His helmet scanner showed faint oxygen, enough to breathe. He pulled it off and tasted the air. Bitter, but real. He checked his rifle, still working. His communicator blinked a weak signal. No response from command. He was truly off the grid. He started walking toward higher ground to send a stronger beacon. The horizon glowed faintly. It was not sunlight. Something burned far away. The silence was thick, too thick. His boots crunched against the glass sand. Every sound seemed too loud. He heard something move behind him, a scrape against stone. He turned fast, rifle raised. Nothing. Then another sound. Closer. Figures moved through the dust, tall and fast. They surrounded him before he could aim. Armor made of bone and metal glinted through the red haze. The shapes spoke in sharp, clipped tones like commands. He stepped back, weapon aimed low, trying to understand. One of them pointed a spear made of glowing steel at his chest. They closed in. Their faces were hidden behind helmets shaped like skulls. One reached out and grabbed his arm. Her grip was strong, too strong. She tore the rifle from his hands and threw it aside. He swung a punch, but another slammed him to the ground. The impact knocked the air from his chest. When they removed their helmets, he froze. They were all women. Their faces were scarred and painted with black lines. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, full of suspicion and fury. They spoke again, voices low and sharp. The tallest one stepped forward. Her armor was heavier, marked with symbols burned into the plates. She looked down at him like he was an animal. She pressed the tip of her spear against his throat and said a single word. He didn't understand it, but the meaning was clear. Captured. They tied his wrists with metal wire and dragged him through the ash. He stumbled as they pulled him toward the distant light. The ground trembled under their steps. Every movement was precise, trained. Soldiers. As they walked, he heard the faint crackle of his comm still working. A weak signal cut through the static. Human. Stay alive. Ethan froze. The voice was male, rough and distorted. The women didn't notice. He looked up at the red sky. The signal faded again, leaving only silence. He was the only man on a world that should have been dead, and someone out there knew he was still breathing. Ethan's boots dragged across the ground as the armored women pulled him through the wasteland. The sky burned above, glowing red and orange from the planet's strange storms. Every breath scraped his lungs. His wrists bled where the wire cut into his skin. He could still taste dust and smoke from the crash. The women said nothing. They moved like soldiers, their steps hard and sure. Their armor clanked with each motion. He counted 12 of them, each carrying strange weapons shaped from bone and steel. They walked in a tight formation, scanning the horizon for threats. Even here, they expected war. After an hour, they reached a canyon split open by ancient blasts. A metal gate stood across the entrance, covered in scorch marks. One of the warriors hit a control rune, and the gate rose with a grinding roar. Inside was a fortress carved into the cliff. Blue lights burned in the walls. Smoke rose from vents above. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and old fire. They dragged Ethan through the tunnels. The walls were smooth metal covered in symbols. The sound of machines echoed in the distance. He saw more of them now. Hundreds of women training with blades, lifting armor, loading strange rifles. They stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Whispers filled the air. Some pointed, some laughed, others looked afraid. One of the guards shoved him forward. He stumbled but kept his balance. A tall woman stepped from the shadows ahead. Her armor was black, marked with scars and trophies from battle. Her face was calm but cold. The soldiers bowed their heads when she approached. She studied Ethan for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was low, steady, full of command. "Who sent you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't understand her language. She frowned and repeated the question slower. He raised his hand slightly. "I don't understand you." The guard beside him struck his back with a staff. Pain shot through him, but he didn't fall. He met the leader's eyes. "I'm human. I crashed. I don't want to fight." She turned to one of her officers and spoke quickly. They argued for a few seconds, then the officer pointed at Ethan's chest plate. She tapped it, and his ship emblem lit faintly. She stepped back with surprise. The room went silent. One word spread through the crowd. It sounded like a name or a curse. Relic. The leader's eyes narrowed. She ordered the guards to take him to a cell. They pushed him down a dark hallway into a chamber made of stone and metal bars. The door slammed shut behind him. He sat on the cold floor, breathing hard. Hours passed. He could hear distant drills, shouting, and gunfire echoing through the halls. This was not a dead world. This was a garrison. These women were soldiers abandoned long ago. He searched his suit for anything useful. His comm still worked, but only on short range. The signal that had reached him before was gone. He replayed the broken message. A man's voice, rough and static-filled. "Human, stay alive." He didn't recognize it. No human fleet had been near this sector in years. Footsteps stopped outside his cell. The leader appeared again. She carried his rifle. She placed it on the ground between them. Her expression was unreadable. She pointed at him, then at the weapon. "Fight," she said in broken English. He stood slowly. "What do you mean?" She repeated the word. "Fight." Then she opened the door and gestured for him to follow. They walked into a vast open arena under the fortress. Thousands of the warrior women watched from above. The floor was marked with blood and sand. She pointed at the center and said, "Trial." Ethan looked around at the crowd, at the sharp weapons and the silent faces. He understood now. He wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was a test. And if he failed, he wouldn't leave this place alive. The crowd roared as Ethan stepped into the arena. The sound hit him like a wave. The air smelled of sweat, oil, and dust. High walls of steel surrounded the fighting pit. Bright lights burned from above, throwing sharp shadows across the ground. The warrior women filled the stands, shouting in their language. Some held banners made from scraps of armor. Others slammed their weapons against the walls. Every face was hungry for blood. Ethan's heart pounded. He could feel his pulse in his ears. His rifle had been replaced with a metal spear. Its weight was uneven, rough. He tested the balance, then glanced up at the leader, the tall one they called General Karen. She stood on a platform, arms crossed, her cold eyes watching every move. A gate opened at the far end of the pit. A massive figure stepped out, armored from head to toe. She was twice Ethan's size, carrying a war blade almost as long as he was tall. The crowd fell silent. The fighter raised her weapon to the sky, and the noise returned, louder than before. Ethan took a slow breath. He had fought aliens before, but never like this. He knew he was outmatched in strength, but not in speed or mind. He crouched low, watching her feet, not her weapon. The fight started fast. The giant woman swung her blade, and Ethan rolled aside just in time. The steel hit the ground with a deep crack. Dust exploded upward. He darted forward and drove the spear at her side, but it bounced off her armor. She grabbed the shaft and snapped it in half with one hand. He jumped back as she swung again, the air slicing past his face. He kept moving, forcing her to turn, to chase. Every motion burned his muscles. The crowd shouted for her to kill him. He could feel their hate, their disbelief that a small outsider could stand against one of their own. The warrior lunged. Ethan sidestepped and grabbed a loose shard from the broken spear. When she charged again, he slid under her arm and drove the shard between the plates at her waist. She roared in pain and swung wildly. The strike hit him across the chest and threw him to the ground. His armor cracked. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. She raised her sword for the final blow. Ethan looked up, half blind from blood in his eyes. Then he saw the weak point again. He rolled toward her leg and drove the shard deep into the joint behind her knee. She screamed and fell to one side. The sword missed his head by inches, slamming into the dirt beside him. The arena went silent. Ethan stood slowly, gasping. The warrior lay still, breathing heavy. He could finish her. The crowd waited for it. Karen's eyes narrowed. She wanted to see what he would do. Ethan dropped the shard. He stepped back and raised his hands. "No," he said quietly, "not this way." The silence broke. The crowd shouted again, angry and confused. Karen raised her hand and the noise stopped at once. She looked down at Ethan for a long moment, then nodded to her guards. They lifted the fallen fighter and carried her away. Karen walked down from the platform. She stopped in front of Ethan and looked him over. "You fight to live," she said in rough English, "not to win." He nodded. "I fight to survive. There's a difference." Her expression changed slightly, not soft but thoughtful. She motioned for the guards to take him. "He stays," she said. "The relic fights like a soldier." As they led him out of the arena, Ethan caught sight of a massive metal door opening deep below the fortress. Inside, machines flickered to life, old and hidden. Blue light spread across the ground, reaching toward the sky. His comm buzzed weakly again in his ear. A distorted voice whispered, "They found you." The alarms began to scream through the fortress. Red lights flashed along the walls and every soldier moved at once. Ethan followed Karen through a narrow hallway lined with weapon racks. The ground shook under their boots. Something big was coming. She shouted orders in her language and warriors rushed past carrying rifles and blades. Ethan's translator implant caught only part of it. Words like attack, sky, enemy. He looked through a narrow slit in the wall and froze. A fleet of ships burned through the clouds. They were not Krith ships. The hulls were clean, polished, and marked with the symbol of the Galactic Council. The same council that had declared humanity extinct. The same council that had abandoned these women here to die. Karen turned to him. "Your people bring war." He shook his head. "Not mine." The first blast hit before he could say more. The ground exploded. The walls cracked. Warriors screamed as fire filled the hall. Ethan grabbed Karen's arm and pulled her down behind a pillar. Shards of metal rained across the floor. She shouted something and 2 squads broke off to defend the upper levels. She looked back at Ethan. "You fight with us." He nodded. "Show me the weapons." They ran to an armory filled with strange rifles powered by blue energy cells. The air buzzed with heat. Ethan took one and tested the trigger. It kicked hard, but clean. He handed another to a nearby soldier, showing her how to brace the stock. She copied his stance, and soon others followed. He shouted over the noise. "Tight lines. Cover fire, no gaps." Karen listened, watching him with sharp eyes. "You command like a leader." He didn't answer. The roof shook again. The enemy was breaking through. They moved to the outer wall where flames and smoke filled the sky. Enemy dropships slammed into the cliffs, unloading armored troops. Plasma fire lit up the air. Ethan and the Krith fired from behind barricades. The sound was deafening. Warriors fell beside him, burned and torn apart, but they held their ground. Karen fought like a storm, her blade cutting through armor and metal alike. Ethan moved with her, switching between rifle bursts and close combat. He could smell the ozone and blood mixed together. Then a new sound cut through the battle, a deep, pulsing hum. Ethan looked up. A massive ship hovered over the fortress, its cannons glowing. He grabbed Karen's arm. "They're charging orbital fire. We need to move." She shook her head. "We stand," he shouted back. "You stand, you die." Before she could answer, the main tower exploded. The blast threw them both to the ground. The world spun. Dust and debris covered them. Ethan pulled her up. Her armor was cracked, blood running down her arm, but she didn't stop. They ran toward the inner tunnels as the fortress above them started to collapse. Warriors poured into the passage carrying wounded and weapons. The roar from above grew louder. Inside, the lights flickered. Ethan stopped when he saw something glowing at the end of the tunnel, a massive engine buried in rock, half machine, half organic. Blue light ran across its surface. Karen stared at it in silence. "Old war machine," she said. "Our ancestors built it. We never woke it." Ethan stepped closer. The engine responded to his presence. The blue light brightened. A control panel flickered to life, showing human code. His stomach tightened. "This isn't yours," he said quietly. "It's human tech." Karen looked at him. "Then it is yours now." Outside, the enemy ship charged another blast. The tunnel shook. The warriors shouted as pieces of the ceiling began to fall. Ethan placed his hand on the glowing console. The system recognized him instantly. The engine started to hum. Karen grabbed his shoulder. "What are you doing?" He stared at the screen. "Ending this." The ground shook harder. The blue light flared, filling the tunnels with a burning glow. Above them, the fortress began to rise. The tunnels shook as the old war engine came alive. The walls glowed blue, and dust fell from the ceiling. Ethan could feel the vibration in his bones. The machine was waking up after centuries of silence. Karen shouted orders to the warriors. They ran to defensive positions near the tunnel mouth. The enemy fleet outside opened fire again. The fortress above them crumbled, but the ground beneath began to shift. The ancient engine was moving, lifting the mountain itself. Ethan's fingers flew over the controls. The interface was old human design, half corrupted but still readable. He found power routes, weapon systems, shield codes. His heart raced as he activated them one by one. The machine's systems hummed louder, the noise turning into a steady growl. Karen stood beside him. "You control it." He nodded. "I can try." The entire chamber shook as the fortress rose. Metal plates broke free from the ground, revealing the machine's true form, a war titan buried deep under the planet. It towered higher than any building, arms made of thick armor and cables. Blue light ran through its body like veins. Outside, the invading fleet opened fire again, striking the armor. The hits shook the inside like thunder. Ethan braced himself and shouted into the comm. "All units hold position. When this thing stands, we fight back." The Krith warriors cheered, their voices echoing through the tunnels. Karen climbed to the command platform beside him. "Show them the strength of the relic," she said. Ethan grinned. "Let's remind them who built this." He pulled a control lever. The Titan's head rose through the storm clouds. Its cannons charged, glowing brighter than the fires in the sky. The enemy ships turned to target it, but the first blast from the Titan tore through their formation. The sky filled with light and debris. The Krith shouted as the ground shook from the impact. Karen watched the destruction, eyes wide. "You bring death like the old gods." Ethan focused on the display. More ships closed in. The Titan was powerful, but old. Systems were failing faster than he could fix them. Warning lights flashed across the console. The core temperature climbed. He knew it wouldn't last. He turned to Karen. Get your people underground. She frowned. You come too. He shook his head. It needs a pilot to hold the charge. If I leave, it dies before the job is done. She stepped closer. You die with it. He gave a small smile. Someone has to make sure they don't come back. Karen looked at him for a long second, then nodded once. She turned to her warriors and ordered the retreat. They ran toward the escape tunnels as the Titan took another hit. Sparks burst from the walls. The entire machine trembled. Ethan turned back to the console. The final power cells were ready. He locked the system and opened the external channel. The enemy fleet circled above, preparing their final strike. He spoke softly into the mic. You left us to die. Now, we're what you made us. He hit the trigger. The Titan fired every weapon at once. The blast tore through the clouds and ripped the enemy ships apart. The explosion filled the sky with light. The ground shook for miles. Then the core went critical. A blue fire rose into the air as the Titan exploded. When the dust settled, half the sky was gone. The fleet was destroyed. The mountain was a crater. Days later, Karen stood among the ruins. The air was still and gray. She held a small metal device in her hand, found near the impact site. When she pressed it, a voice played. Ethan's voice. If they ever come again, tell them humanity remembers. She looked to the horizon where the stars began to return. The human's emblem was carved into her armor. She whispered his name once, then turned to lead her people into the new dawn.